Welcome onto the show, our guy Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. Bunch of things we can ask him about around the NFL, but the reason I reached out to him yesterday was the work he's been doing to cover what's going on with the NFL in a class action lawsuit that involves Sunday Ticket. So, Mike, I actually just wanted you to first, I guess, explain what's going on. I got a bunch of these little cards sent to me in the mail as a longtime Sunday Ticket guy, and I didn't bother to read them or get involved. So, what am I missing out on?
Well, you're not missing out on anything. You'll be part of the class. There are millions of end consumers, bar owners, et cetera, in this class action that started back in 2015. It's taken 9 years to get to trial. At one point, the case was thrown out. Appeals court put it back in. It really all comes down to how the NFL sells Sunday Ticket. And there are two big issues as far as consumers are concerned. Number one, there's evidence to support the idea that the NFL artificially required the price for Sunday Ticket to be high enough that it would cause enough people to not get it, so they would watch their local affiliate, whatever games CBS and Fox was making available. There was a document in the opening statement where Fox insists on a certain price point because the idea is they want people to just turn on their TV and watch whatever games are available through their rabbit ear antennas, their local cable system, their online provider that has local channels, whatever, and not watch out-of-market games through the Sunday Ticket package. That's issue one. Issue two is, and I've sensed this has been a problem since I first became aware of Sunday Ticket, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be able to watch the games of one team that didn't play in the market that I lived in. You don't have the option to just get the games of the team that doesn't play in the market you live in. And they market it that way. For Saints fans in New York, Packers fans in Pittsburgh, this is how you get it. Yeah, but you can't just buy those games. You got to buy the whole damn thing, the whole enchilada, the full price. And this is part of this notion that the NFL is violating the antitrust laws by fixing the prices, telling DirecTV and now YouTube TV what they must charge for this in order to protect their deals with CBS and Fox. That's what it's all about. And if they lose, I think we end up being able to buy Sunday Ticket cheaper. And I think we possibly end up being able to buy it one team at a time, 1 week at a time, even one game at a time if we want to.
What's the NFL stance?
We didn't do anything wrong. I mean, that's the usual. Yeah. Anybody that's ever sued, we didn't do anything wrong. You should throw the case out. Here are the legal grounds. We're going to spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers who are billing by the hour to research and write and churn and throw everything we have at this case so we never have to go to trial. And they've failed to keep it from going to trial. The NFL is very adept at avoiding trial, and they're very good at winning when they go to trial. Remember the major antitrust case brought by the USFL 37 years ago? It went to trial, and the NFL lost, but the verdict was $1. It's going to be more than $1 if they lose in this case. Now, the high end of the damages are $7 billion, and under antitrust law, they get tripled. So $21 billion, I mean, that is what caught the attention of a lot of people. I don't know that they can prove $7 billion. That's part of what the plaintiffs have to do. But if the NFL loses, it won't be $1. It might be closer to $1 than $7 billion, but it's not going to be $1.
What are the chances that they lose and that there is a difference for the consumer, for our listeners, in terms of what they're allowed to do in the way of Sunday Ticket moving forward?
Well, my sense is it's difficult to understand what's happening because there's hardly any coverage for this trial. So I have to search and look and see. And, you know, it wasn't in my plans for the summer to spend multiple weeks in Los Angeles sitting in a courtroom. So that's not part of my agenda. It's a small piece of what we cover, but there isn't a lot out there. I think the NFL's primary arguments are legal arguments, that the broadcast antitrust exemption applies to this, that they shouldn't even be in court. I think they've already tried something along those lines to get the case thrown out. Like I said earlier, it was thrown out and then it was reinstated. But on the facts of the case, I don't think they have many good arguments. I found an item in the Hollywood Reporter where Beth Wilkinson, a name that you guys surely remember from the initial Dan Snyder Commanders investigation, she did an opening statement that talked about how much CBS pays Tony Romo, and I don't know how that factors into this. And she made some argument about Seinfeld was exclusive property of NBC, and they could televise it whenever they wanted to. I don't think they have a lot of factual defenses. I think that they did what they're accused of doing. The question is, do they get lucky with the jury? Do they get lucky with the verdict? But I think that what's going to happen is whatever the end result of this, it's going to get tied up on appeal as the NFL does everything it can to try to turn this thing over and knock whatever the final number is down to zero.
Mike Florio with us here on Grant and Danny. So, in your view, Mike, is the NFL? I don't know how to say this the right way, but I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But did they do this? Like, does this make sense? Does 1+1 = 2 here in terms of trying to make sure the price point is so outrageously high, probably higher than it needs to be?
Everything that I've seen in the reporting on the case, and I've been following it for years now, suggests that they have what they consider smoking guns, where the NFL specifically insisted on a certain price point in order to protect the arrangements they have with CBS and Fox. Apparently, one document that was shown at opening statement, I may have mentioned this earlier, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, but Fox said, this is what we want. We want it to be no cheaper than this. And Apple reportedly was going to buy the rights when the DirecTV contract expired, and Apple just wanted to include it in the current cost of Apple TV Plus, which is what, $6.99 a month? They were just going to include it. Oh, no. We can't do that. The NFL told them they couldn't do it. That's the allegation. And I think based on everything I've seen, the plaintiffs are going to have a not too difficult time proving that. And of course, the NFL will always have an answer for everything. But I think at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. And it sure seems like the NFL, and this is what they do with a lot of things, like with gambling. Like, there are things they should really be concerned about, but they get so caught up in stuffing money into their pockets. Their attitude is, let's just make as much money as we can, and we'll worry about the problems later. Maybe we'll never have to worry about the problems. Maybe it'll never come to fruition. Let's just keep making as much money as we possibly can grab and stuff in our coffers.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, here on Grant and Danny. How realistic and how soon is it that the league is going to completely reshape its offseason schedule? We heard a lot of talk about that last week.
Yeah, and it was really odd to me that most of the players who were asked about it didn't know about it. Now, if I'm a player, do I want to hear about this revolutionary proposal that the union has concocted to dramatically overhaul the offseason program from my union rep, from union management, or do I want to read about it in a tweet from a reporter whose paycheck is signed by Roger Goodell? I mean, if that's how I'm finding out about it, I'm a little fishy about what's really going on here, and I'm a little curious about it. I haven't seen many players who have said they love this idea. There have been union reps that have said, I don't like the idea. Ryan Kelly, who's on the executive committee, sounded ambivalent at best about the possibility. So, my big takeaway when I saw that they were putting the proposal together, because we reported back in February they were looking into it. But when it came out, they're putting a proposal together. Look, you guys know right now, the union and everybody else who's paying attention knows that the NFL is expected in the next year and a half to make a proposal to expand the regular season to 18 games. So if you're the union, why are you asking for something when you're otherwise in a position where you should be expecting the league to come to you and say, we want to play 18 games? Take this time to put together the maximum list of things you want. So when they say we want 18 games, you say this is what we want in return. It's just one of the subtleties of negotiation. You don't want to make the first move. Get your stuff together, wait for the league to come to you about 18 games, and then do this thing. Because even if the league wants this, when the union asks for it, this is part and parcel of collective bargaining. The league's response is going to be, what's in it for us? What are you going to do for us? That's how it works when you have a collective bargaining agreement and you're proposing a change to it. You just don't make a change unilaterally. You give something up. So I think their best play is sit back and wait and make sure your rank and file really want this, because I've yet to get the impression the rank and file really does.
Mike, so years ago, I lived in New York, and I'm a DC guy, so I'm a Washington fan, and I couldn't get the games. I had to go to some bar or so, and I eventually just started going to a barbecue joint, and I got a bunch of my friends to come with me because we couldn't get DirecTV in my building. There was a whole thing, whatever, and I couldn't get Sunday Ticket, and it was the biggest hassle in the world. And so I was, kvetching about this back then, that I had no access. I was locked out of being able to watch my team, and I was stuck watching the Giants and the Jets. Is this now one of the major steps that you think is going to sort of change the way people may be able to consume it if they're out of market forever? Is this kind of a big domino potential to fall?
Well, there's two ways to look at this. One, in the narrowest sense, it could force the NFL to let whoever gets the package to price it however they see fit without some minimum required by the league. Or also make it available if you just want Washington games, if you live in New York or whatever the case may be, or you just want this one weekend coming up. There's a lot of great games this weekend. I'm willing to buy the full week of Sunday Ticket league-wide. Whatever the case may be, you have a lot more freedom. The other way to look at this, if this thing goes completely as far as it can against the NFL. You could have the teams required to sell their out-of-market packages team by team, one by one. So you could have all the Cowboys games available beyond the individual markets where the Cowboys would otherwise be on free TV, sold by Amazon. You could have the Packers games on Google. You could have Amazon buy up all the rights if they wanted to, but it would be sold team by team. And that's what the NFL has been trying to avoid for years now. They got a broadcast antitrust exemption that, as it's written, you can argue only applies to over-the-air broadcast. You could argue it doesn't apply to cable, doesn't apply to satellite, and definitely doesn't apply to streaming. So this fight is out there, and I think part of it is stuffed into this current case. But that's the nuclear option that would be ultimately great for fans. Think about a college Saturday. Games are on all day long. Games are on every channel that carries sports practically. You could, maybe without having to buy Sunday ticket, just put on Fox and there's Steelers Eagles, and you put on CBS and there's Cowboys Giants, and you put on FS1 and there's another game, and you put on ESPN and there's another game. I mean, in theory, it could be like the college packages, especially if the end result is the NFL has to sell these team by team. Now, that could create chaos as it relates to revenue sharing and the salary cap and whatnot, so that could be a bad outcome for fans. But there's a sweet spot there where the league holds its competitive integrity through the salary cap and they share their revenue, but at the same time, these games are easier for all of us to see without having to plunk down, what is it, $350, $400 a year for Sunday tickets.
Spinning around the headlines in the NFL with Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. I'm a spring football guy. I believe we are brothers in arms in this. I saw you tweeting that you enjoyed the season over the weekend, but I'm curious how the business of ball went for the UFL in year one here with the merger. The Rock was not nearly as involved or certainly public facing as I expected when they said he was still in the mix. Having said that, thoroughly enjoy the product. I mean, we're here in DC where the attendance is still pretty good. It's like number 2, I think, behind St. Louis, maybe in the whole league. What were the numbers like? What was the TV ratings like to in terms of sustainability for this thing?
The ratings were north of 800,000 on average, which was better than last year for either the USFL or the XFL, which came together to create this 8-team UFL. Now, a lot of the games were on broadcast, and there's still strength in being available on over-the-air 3-letter network TV. Fox and ABC did a lot of the games. That leads to naturally higher ratings. I've been skeptical about spring football. The AAF, I thought, was just kind of poorly run and not well capitalized. And it always felt like they were flying a little too close to the sun on wings of pastrami, and it fell apart barely after it got started. The XFL in 2020 was promising with Vince McMahon bringing it back. The pandemic screwed it up. And then USFL and XFL, it never really felt like it was getting traction. And something about combining the leagues, it's worked. There are some mistakes they've made. There are some marketing failures. I don't know why they had the game last night start at 7 o'clock, an hour before the NBA game. I think it got lost in the shuffle. And they had a great opportunity they knew or should have known the NFL was going to adopt that XFL electric football kickoff formation that we're going to see this year. And when they put the XFL and the USFL together, they didn't use that kickoff. I mean, they would have gotten natural interest from NFL fans who knew what was coming with the NFL kickoff formation, and people would have watched just to see what the hell this thing is going to look like, and maybe they would have been interested, and maybe they would have kept watching.
On that front, do you feel like they did a good enough job promotion-wise? I am not interested. But I also, wasn't seeking it out, but I feel like I never knew when the games were on. I never really, was able to navigate to a good website to sort of figure things out. Maybe it's my own user error there, Mike, but I just feel like they weren't really very good at getting in front of eyeballs.
No, I think you're right. Their website isn't the easiest thing in the world to navigate. It wasn't as obvious when the games were going to be on. And look, the problem is because it doesn't have a big following, it's a chicken and the egg thing. There were some interesting storylines last week. Tez Tabor of the San Antonio Brahmas was just flat out saying he was going to try to hit St. Louis Battlehawks quarterback A.J. McCarron as hard as he could because he had an injured ankle, and he was making no bones about it. It would have been the biggest story in sports if it was happening in the NFL. And there's been other things. I mean, the guy that won the league MVP award, they got benched on Saturday and might not even play in the UFL championship. So I just don't think there's enough natural interest to justify the coverage. And then you don't get the coverage and you don't get the interest. And it just kind of, it's got to churn that way, but there's got to be an effort by the league to affirmatively get people to cover the sport. They got to appeal to in the local market. They got to appeal to the radio stations. They got to appeal to the newspapers. They got to appeal to the national platforms like mine. They got to be more aggressive, and they just got to have a better idea. Like the first week of the year, they knew St. Louis was going to be a great market. Have St. Louis playing at home the first weekend. So you turn it on and you see a full stadium. There's not like a full stadium to make you think something is worth watching. The draft weekend, and I don't know how they could have worked this out logistically, but why not have the Michigan Panthers play at Ford Field draft weekend when all those thousands of people are there? Maybe on the Sunday after the draft ends, or you start the game that night, you get 20,000 people who wander into Ford Field to watch that game. So there were just a lot of little things that I just don't feel like they have strategically buttoned up that they really need to work on.
It's a great idea. It's a great point. I'll let you go on this one.
One thing they have great, though, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go.
They're great with officiating transparency. And they've got Dean Blandino and Mike Pereira, and it is a master class on what the NFL should be doing with us seeing and hearing everything that's happening behind the curtain when they're doing replay review. The NFL needs to adopt that as soon as possible. The UFL has perfected that.
Yeah, totally agree. That is a no-brainer. I don't know that the league will ever get on board, but it would certainly add a lot as a consumer. Last one, I saw you've written a lot about this. Have we found out, or when are we going to find out what the deal is with the tampering? I think Cousins, there were 2 players, maybe the Falcons and one other team, right?
Yeah, the Saquon Barkley situation with the Giants and the Eagles.
Yeah.
James Franklin, the Penn State coach, blurted out that Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, made the pitch directly to Barkley about all the Penn State fans that are also Eagles fans, and that's what sparked the investigation of the Eagles. Now, that seemed kind of flimsy, but they may have, sometimes a witch hunt finds a witch, and they may have gotten evidence to show that that was a communication that happened. And the key is during that 52-hour window where agents are allowed to negotiate directly with teams before free agency starts, the teams just can't communicate with the players directly under any circumstances. Kirk Cousins blurted out arguably 4 different ways that the Falcons tampered with him. This Eagles thing is pending. Adam Schefter reported draft week that the outcome possibly was going to be announced. The NFL said, no, it's not. Then last Sunday, he said last week it was likely to come, and it didn't. And look, in fairness to him, he never said it's definitely coming. And it wouldn't be the first time that, the entity that is going to make the news sees a report that an announcement is coming and just decides, well, we're going to delay it just, so that report was wrong. That is hardly unprecedented if that's what happened. But regardless, it feels like, based upon the way it's been reported, the Eagles are going to get waxed, and I think the precedent would suggest a 3rd-round pick for them. And the Falcons are going to get it worse, maybe a 1st-round pick or maybe even more. You think about the fact the Dolphins lost a 1 and a 3 for attempting to tamper with Sean Payton and Tom Brady a couple of years ago. They didn't even get either guy. The Falcons tampered with Cousins and got Cousins. I won't be surprised if they lose at least a 1st-round pick.
Mike, thank you as always, buddy. Have a great week.